Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Rich.
And I'm Alex. And today's Table Talk is... the Wild West.
Yeehaw!
Stick 'em up.
Actually, I was thinking about getting... So, we have a new game called Cash and Guns, where they have, you actually have guns and you point them at each other.
That just sounds
Yeah.
problematic.
We were playing it in public.
Like actual guns?
Yeah.
Silver?
Yeah. Well, no, they were black.
That's even worse.
Yeah, I know. But, like, you think they could make them, like, green or, like, purple? Or
Well,
something?
not to go down the rabbit hole already, but you know the reason why Nerf guns are bright orange.
Right, so
is
nobody...
cops don't
Right.
shoot well normally. Anyway.
Well, when the airsoft guns came out,
yeah,
those
they have to
legit, though.
Yeah.
Like, it looks a little real. So anyway, we were playing them at KCBC, which is a really cool brewery in Bushwick, Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, yeah, neighborhood.
KCBC. But we were playing them in the tap room. And I have a photo on our Instagram at bruinboards.com or at bruinboards. Everybody just like holding them up like right in each other's faces.
Wow.
I know. I was like, oh, this is pretty.
See, that's one of those moments where you get in the prestige, you know, when the guy's like, shoot my hand, there's
Yeah.
no bullet in it, and they actually put a bullet in the gun and
Yeah.
he loses his finger. That's where
Yes.
my mind goes.
All right, so back on track.
Back to the West.
All right.
It's wild.
It's wild. It's the West.
Yeah.
It's the Wild.
The Wild West.
So the board game today is a little game called Colt Express. If you're not familiar with the show yet, and you probably aren't because it's only our second episode.
Second episode.
We pair beer with board games, and we also, upon that theme, we elaborate on our own little conversation. So,
Sorry, we can keep going, but
I didn't turn it
on. But this can be just part of it. Hello. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Continuing on.
So today's board game is Colt Express. It's a super cool game. It's very pretty, if I can say that. I feel like we had to take a step into the not extravagant, but something very different after going with the Game of Life.
Game of Life.
Yeah, the Game of Life. When we said it during, it's not the game that we really. I mean, it was a good conversation piece for us, but as game players, not the type of game that I would really want to talk about the most during this type of show.
Not usually.
This is definitely a step toward that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yes, so I love ingenuity, I love creativity. 3D board games are just awesome to me. Basically, the whole concept of the game is we're all train robbers. So if you've ever wanted to be a train robber, this is your chance to, have a gun, get on the train, and rob the nice, decent people of this train that are just trying to get from one place to another.
Jesse James and the Bruin Borders.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's going down.
I don't understand that reference, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You don't understand Jesse James?
Jesse James.
What?
I'm sorry.
Jesse James is like the ultimate bank robber of the American West.
Yeah, of course he is. I knew that.
We'll get into this. All right.
I know John Dillinger. I know John Dillinger.
Well, that's good.
Well, that's because I'm from Indiana, though, and he's.
That's all right. It's nothing to be ashamed
Does
of.
that give me any points?
Yes. Half a
Any
point.
respect
We'll
points?
give you a 5 point. What was the one that you gave Game of Life? 5.7.
Yeah, I did.
5.7.
Yeah.
5.7.
All right. But yeah, so it's a fun game. It's a lot of 3D. It's the only game really that I know. I'm sure there's others out there. They have pieces in the game where this is all just like play. Like this is all just to like liven up the game.
Right here.
Yeah, like these little cactus and these little tumbleweed things. They're just decoration, and there's no point of like you don't really need to have them. It's just all for the theme of the game. But obviously, so that is being paired with our beer, which is Anchor Steam Beer, which was when we can go more depth about it, but it's basically this beer that was made out in California back in the 1800s. It's a lager that is warm fermented just because they didn't have refrigeration or ice or anything like that. So it's the type of beer that, maybe some bank robbers might be drinking back in the day.
Stop over before they go to the hills
Right.
of Golden, California.
Right, yeah. All the money that they stole from the train, they'll take it to the saloon.
Right.
With all the people from like the gold rush and everything, and they'll just share a drink with the people that they just stole money from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They probably would put it in Wells Fargo because I think Wells Fargo was actually a bank. Even.
Oh yeah.
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 Well, here, cheers to episode 2.
Episode 2.
Here you are. That is a much better beer.
This is very good.
That is very good.
This is very good. I can see why it's been around so long. This is like, it's got a good hearty flavor, but
I think they changed it up a little bit.
Okay.
I don't think they still ferment it on the roof of the brewery. That I'd be interested to know that. But before we get too far into that, the pairing for conversation-wise, what we're doing, we've decided that we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite Western stories. I don't know if we agreed that it had to be necessarily real or fake or whatever, but I'm assuming these are stories that we just really appreciate or like about the Wild West. So we have our secret stories. I had to write mine down because I don't have a very good memory.
You have a great memory.
As you've probably noticed from episode 1, Alex can pull facts out of the air like that. Is a very good memory. Not to put any pressure on you, but
but yeah, it's okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's talk about the game.
Yeah.
So basically, it's created in 2014 by Christoph Reinbold.
Cool. Can
play 2 to 6 players. We've got all 6 players here on the board here. Do you want to talk about the player that you chose and why you chose him?
Oh, so I chose Doc. If I'm perfectly honest, I think that Doc is a very well-dressed man.
Yeah.
You can probably see it right there. He's a very well-dressed man.
Very nice.
But I also have an affinity towards Doc as in Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Strangely enough, the first Back to the Future movie I watched was Back to the Future Part 3 when they went to the West. And I was so confused.
That's so on topic.
Yeah, I know. But I was, as a 9 or 10, I forget how old I was when I saw it, I was so confused the entire time.
Because you didn't know what happened.
Well, yeah, they would do it was like summer movie night at the local pool.
Yeah.
And I guess I was part of tennis or something. And the tennis coach was like, "Yeah, come on, you guys come over." And it was my first time. They were like, "What were you watching? Back to the Future." Oh, great.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear the Part 3 part. So I show up and I'm like, this.
They're not going to explain anything.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like eating It's kind of like if you arrive at a restaurant and you see the other person like dabbing their face on with a napkin.
Right.
And you realize they're like, they just ate something.
Right.
But the plate's empty. But I know that there was something there. I don't know what it was.
The natural assumption is that there was a meal and that it had just been finished.
But you're missing it. So it plagued me. Part 3 plagued me for like a year before I actually saw Part 1.
Oh, you didn't immediately just go out?
No, I didn't. And I don't know why. Things happen. But
I guess that makes sense. But for like the most entertaining part of that whole story is that for the first probably half hour of the movie or the whole movie, you thought this was what everybody was talking about as Back to the Future.
Well, I didn't really know the significance. I just knew that it was a movie titled Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
So this was before I became kind of a movie buff beyond like the Star Wars, Disney era of my life. And then my dad said, "We're going to Blockbuster. We're going to rent you this. We're going to watch it this weekend." And then he showed me the other 2, and my mind was blown. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally get to understand what happened that led to this. But what is it? John Mulaney has like some kind of stand-up where he's like they really don't explain that much in the first movie to begin with. Like,
no,
they don't explain how they met.
No.
Like
no, well, and
they don't explain like how that odd relationship even came to exist.
Well, and that actually leads into a little bit about the West in general, the Wild West, is that I think really good Westerns, in particular movies, are ones that just kind of drop you. Like the Google Man. Yeah. And just bloop, drop you there, street view.
But the Wild West is also, it's at this point, I guess, I mean, it's such a strong theme that you can assume so much.
Right, exactly.
So you can just get plopped into it. Right. Like it's kind of like what you can do with any Star Wars. That's why Star Wars can do it now, because it's such an established universe that now you can just plop into any scene in a Star Wars universe.
Which is interesting because New Hope, they plop you in the middle and they don't explain anything.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So, anyway,
that was my theory shattered. But I think that's why a lot of Wild West movies work that way.
Oh, they're great.
You can assume, there's a saloon. There's this there's a bad guy in town and nobody likes him and nobody wants to stand up to him.
And normally dressed in black. which
I'm normally just all black, which I'm assuming has to be sweltering hot.
Yeah. Yul Brynner was probably very uncomfortable in many of those movies. Yeah.
Yes. So back to the game. So the game is 2 to 6 players. You're Doc. I am Tuco. Tuco. I kind of chose this guy.
He's got some cool locks, man.
He's really. That's really who I want to be in another life. Is this guy the handlebar mustache?
All he needs is a pirate ship. This guy's great.
No, it's just really this. Look at that gun too.
Yeah.
It's just if I was gonna rob a train, I'd be doing that. I wouldn't do the thing he's doing with his hair. He's like kind of twirling it a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
At the end. Although Gimli, Lord of the Rings,
he
did that with his beard.
He has braids.
And I would do it with a beard. I wouldn't do it with my actual hair.
You want to do it with actual hair?
Yeah. I don't know what the line is there. Why I would do it down here but not up here.
I don't know.
But I guess that's for my therapist.
Live out the braids, man. If you can do it, do it. Why not?
Yeah. But also I chose Tuco because of Breaking Bad. Because I just thought Tuco's kind of like the big bad guy in that.
The bruiser.
Yeah. So anyway, you choose a character in the game. The characters give you some kind of special power. So for instance, in this game, you do shoot each other. We don't condone gun violence, but in board games, it's awesome. So so Tuco can shoot anybody else through the floor or through the roof of a car.
Oh, cool.
So if I was shooting this character's Ghost, he's the white character. If you're on top of me, I can shoot you on the top.
Okay.
Your character gets an extra card in your deck. So it's kind of a deck building game. That's one of the mechanics of it. But another mechanic is that it's programmable. So it's one of those program games. So you program the turn ahead of what actually happens. So you play your cards. So each round gives you a certain way to play your cards. Everybody plays the cards in a program as how they want to move across the board.
Interesting.
But the game has mechanisms that basically at some point in the game, if not every turn, something unpredictable is going to happen.
Okay.
Which means you might not be doing exactly what you thought you'd be doing.
Do you find that the speed of it is pretty much the same, or does it kind of ramp up as the game goes on?
The speed of it, the train doesn't go anywhere.
Let's do it now, then I'm gonna maybe do it in editing. So what I'm wondering is it kind of like Settlers of Catan, where it's kind of there's really not much speed involved, or is it kind of like Spit or something where like it gets faster?
No, there's no speed aspect to the game at all. So everybody's it's like any other game as far as speed is concerned, where if you're taking too long and somebody says, "Hey, you gotta go," that's pretty much it. But speed itself doesn't have any play to it at all in the game. Everybody basically, you get a hand that gives you certain cards and actions that you can do. So you can move side to side between cars.
Cool.
You can move up and down like this, in and out of the car. You can move the Marshal, which is the yellow character over here.
Yeah, Mr. Marshall, right here. Or Mrs. Marshall.
Or Mrs. Marshall, yes.
I love these figures.
Yeah, the figures are great. So the Marshal, you can move from car to car. Okay. And that forces other players that are in that car to move up onto the roof. So there's that, and then you can shoot people, obviously. You can punch people. If you punch them, they have to drop some of their loot. So you can't really see it on this. We can kind of show them on the GoPro. Okay. But there's little coin purses, little jewels, and then there's a big safe that's being guarded by the Marshal at the front in the locomotive. So you pick all of these up as you go, and basically the thief that steals the most at the end of the game wins the game.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the playtime like?
The playtime is 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
Ages 10 and up. It's a very easy game. You can play with 2 players. You can play it with up to 6. I played it 2-player. It's very nice. Basically, the less players you're playing with, the shorter the train gets.
Got it.
So the playing field just gets a little smaller to move around.
Got it.
So yeah, and that's pretty much it. But like I said, this is one of my favorite games right now. It's a little old in terms of new games. So 2014 is a little while back, but I played this a long time ago with another gaming group back in Indiana. Shout out Indiana.
Indiana gaming Hawkins, groups. Indiana.
Hawkins, yeah. Hawkins. I don't even think it exists in real life.
It could be.
I don't think it does.
Stuck behind a wall of some kind.
Yeah. Stuck behind a wall. It's forever gone. It just sank.
Yeah, it's just gone. It's just disappeared.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just loved it. I loved the mechanics. It's beautifully done. It's a good game to share with friends that aren't really into in-depth board games. They can kind of get a feel for some heavier mechanics. But I don't think it's the next step after a Game of Life.
Right.
But it's definitely an improvement to the Game of Life.
It seems to, at least one thing I really like about it, because it's so visually expansive, where most board games are pretty like horizontal. I like that you have the vertical aspect.
Right.
I feel like, especially the 10 and up, like I could see 10 to 13-year-old, if you're playing with, I don't know, your nephew or something.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be a very fun family game. Especially,
Yeah.
I feel like in that age group, people love like the bank robber mystique and stuff. So.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely feel like it would be a good game for if your kids are getting into games or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's an easy enough mechanic that they can figure that out, and the strategy in it's pretty simple. I mean, you're just trying to move around, avoid other people, and pick up loot basically at the end of the game.
And you've played this at one of the Bruin board nights.
Yeah, it's very popular right now with the Bruin boards group. We probably play it every night.
That's fun.
So we have weekly game groups that meet up every week. So especially on our Wednesday night game group at a bar called Logan's Run in Park Slope, this almost comes out every single night.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Another big aspect. So any deck building game, you're basically relying on the cards that you keep drawing. So you keep drawing
these cards right here.
Yeah. So let's say your dock, right?
Right.
So these are your deck of cards here.
Oh,
all right. So that's your deck of cards. So every round you draw 6 of those cards at random.
Nice.
Right.
Dock's
so
very active.
But the thing is, once you start getting shot. So let's say I'm Tuco here. So Tuco has shot cards. So whenever he shoots you, so this is a shot card. I'll show him down here. This is a shot card. So basically when you shoot somebody, I give him my card, and that goes in his deck, and then he might draw it again. And if he draws it, it's completely useless. You can't do anything with it.
Interesting.
So it's just this dead card in your hand. So if you've played a lot of deck building games, dead cards in your hand are just so irritating because it limits the amount of actions that you can do.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's a fun mechanic, and that paired with the programming aspect of it, where you're not literally just taking a turn and moving your guy along the board. You're trying to predict it along with everybody else who's trying to predict it.
Interesting. So, all right. Cool. I like that.
And then a little bit about the beer. So like I said, it's the West Coast. So it had to be a West Coast brewery for this.
Naturally.
It had to be. I liked that it had a little bit to do with the gold rush as well. It's such a big. I mean, it's kind of why we started moving out west, right? In the beginning, because I honestly don't know that much, but the gold rush is a big draw to the deep west.
Catalyst. Yeah.
Right. So timeline here. So this game actually takes place in 1899, which is the tail end of what would be determined the Wild West.
Okay.
Which Wild West would be what, technically? It's like a 30-year stint, right?
I mean, it's essentially before the Civil War to slightly after. So, the Civil War is 1861 to 1865-ish, give or take. And I believe the territories began to be actively explored past Missouri around 1840-ish.
Around 1840.
So it was slow at first, but eventually, like, everyone started pushing over. The Mormons moved to Salt Lake,
right?
And then their pioneers would move up to the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
You get the Gold Rush, and then well, this is kind of part of the story. We can talk about it later, but you get the Navajo nation battling it out with the Northern Mexican Empire, which at that time was Nevada and New Mexico and stuff like that. Right. So then the Americans come in. It's like this 3-way perfect storm.
Yeah.
But I'll get to that later.
Okay. Yeah. That's one of your stories?
Yeah, one of my stories.
Didn't mean to...
No, it's okay. So it's all right.
But, so it's really just interesting story about how they made this
game. Yeah, tell me about it.
I mean, it's so... it's ingenuity at its finest. I mean, it's brewers at their finest. It's like craft brewing to me. It's just like an art form. I know that. I mean, I'm not completely knee deep into it, but I appreciate it and I respect it.
Yeah.
And these guys were doing it in California. So they were making a lager with lager yeast.
Okay.
Usually, when you make a lager, the way you ferment the yeast is you basically ferment it in like a cold area.
Okay.
So obviously refrigeration, they didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have a lot of ice. Right. So to cool off the wort, basically this brewery, they would pump the wort up onto the ceiling. This is...
Sorry, dumb question.
Yeah.
Wort?
Wort is what basically the beer is in the fermentation stage.
Got it.
So it's basically sitting there just like fermenting.
Got it. Okay.
So ales are warm fermented. So the yeast that they use in ales, I might be butchering this, but you can correct me, whatever, in the comments or whatever. But this is my general knowledge. Ales are warm fermented. You put them in warm climates to ferment and let the yeast do its thing. Okay. Lagers, you do that in cold temperatures. So this is a lager yeast that is more warm fermented than cold. Okay. So they're in California, and it's a breezy city, I'm assuming. I've never been, but I've always heard
been to San Francisco.
I've never been to San Francisco. So,
lovely town.
But I've heard that it's very windy.
It's very windy.
Okay.
Yeah, we can get into this later.
Well, okay. But yeah, so they pump it up onto the roof.
Cool.
And the idea was that the wind and like basically everything coming off the Pacific kind of cools it off on the roof.
Naturally.
And the steam aspect of it comes from basically at night, if you would walk by the brewery, steam just lifting up off the roof of the building.
Interesting.
So that's where the steam aspect comes into it, and then and that's the type of beer that they.
I like it.
So all the guys mining for gold and not finding anything after a 10-hour day come back to the saloon, and
at least they got good beer.
Yeah,
no gold, but
so
good beer.
This is what they had.
1896. So 1896 is 2 years. Right before Brooklyn became part of New York City.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 1898. They call it the Great Mistake of 1898 because less than 1,000 people in Brooklyn voted to join New York than not join. So our entire history of us being part of New York City was based on less than 1,000 people saying yes.
Really?
Rather than no. Yeah.
Really?
And I think that number is even less than like it's significantly less than 1,000. So yeah, thanks to them, we now have a city of 8.5 million.
But it's known as like the biggest.
Well, a lot of it's classic. I feel like it's classic New York too, where it's like everyone likes to Greg, right?
Yeah.
So Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So 1898. That's when it became officially part of New York City.
And we talked about this last time, but when was the bridge created?
That was finished. Brooklyn Bridge was 1883. 1883.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's shortly after. It was basically started at 60. Gosh, I want to say it was 1867, the 60s of 1800s,
and they finished it.
Yeah.
So, but Brooklyn didn't technically become part of the city, though.
No, it was its
after the bridge was even built.
After the bridge was built. So
I would assume that would have worked the
other
way around.
The other way. Yeah.
Okay.
No, they wanted to connect the two cities. Brooklyn was very distinct from a different. It was always. Frankly, it's kind of what New Jersey is now. Where New Jersey's a very distinctly different.
We don't talk about New Jersey.
Hey, New Jersey's a garden state. All you folks that live in New Jersey, I gotta say, here's to you.
We love you.
And here's the reason why that I love New Jersey. I'm gonna tell you why. You can live in a state, go from border to border, hit up 2 major cities in the United States, influential and whatever, but you don't have to pay any of their taxes, which is great. And you have Newark, Philly, and JFK, and LaGuardia to an extent, the airports. So you can travel if you want to actually. And I've always wondered why there's no more like YouTube, first class, like a Casey Neistat kind of character, people that travel the world or whatever. I'm kind of surprised there's not more people living in New Jersey because of that, because you can get to those airports really fast, and you don't have to deal with as much traffic, and you got the beaches.
Well, you got to come, if you're going to do JFK or LaGuardia, you have to pay the toll to get in to the city.
Yeah, but if you're a YouTube influencer, at that point you can afford it.
That's true.
What's money, right? What's money? Anyway, so here's to New Jersey. And so Brooklyn was like New Jersey at the time.
Okay.
It was distinct, it was its own thing. And 1898, it became its own, it became part of New York City 2 years after this beer was invented. So
when my wife and I moved out here, we did the audio tour of our neighborhood and kind of Brooklyn area in general.
Big fan of that.
Yeah, and we wanted to get to know the neighborhood. It's a very historical neighborhood. Brooklyn Heights is. There's a lot of things to see in this neighborhood. It's a very it's a very churchy neighborhood. So there's almost like every other stop was this church and this church. Yep. But there was a stop that it talked about the Historical Society, which is just down the street here on No, it's Pierpont.
Pierpont.
Well, I guess it's Pierpont and then Montague.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So to anybody that's not from New York, this is probably like one of those conversations that old people have about like, no, it was back in, no, he got married to her and she got married. Like, don't worry if you don't know the streets. But
you can go ahead and like microwave your dinner right now.
Yeah.
Just like that while we're talking. Go ahead. Yeah.
But basically the story that they were telling was the kind of politics between Brooklyn and Manhattan.
Yeah.
And how Brooklyn was like the anti-Manhattan.
Oh yeah.
That's like the words that they use.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, and that's really when I started identifying. I mean, we kind of liked the idea of Brooklyn to begin with, moving out here, just because it felt more of our speed. But then that's kind of when I started like really identifying with like the neighborhood and everything.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, the anti-Manhattan. Like we're like doing like we're talking about board games, like like
it's true.
It's like we're talking about good beer, good board games, and that kind of stuff. This just in, we're getting something from our.
I was right when it was less than 1,000. 277 votes.
Wow. That's what made Brooklyn part of.
That's like half of my block.
Yeah.
Like that amount of people.
Well, we could go out and find that many people right now, and we could probably.
Let's change the vote.
We could fit that many people.
Let's reverse it.
All right, let's go.
277 votes, people.
Thank you to Andrea, our lovely assistant,
our esteemed assistant,
who is working behind the scenes and giving us information. Now that we don't have to guess as much.
No, this is great.
On a lot of stuff.
Although
we'll probably still get lots of things blatantly wrong.
No, that's okay.
All right, let's move into our conversation because I'm excited about sharing my stories.
Great. Yeah.
So the pairing here is obviously we have a Wild West themed game. We have Wild West beer, and we're going to talk about our favorite top 5 Wild West stories. So I'm excited, but I want to hear what your number. We'll start at 5. And we're
going to go numerical order.
Yeah, if you want to rank them.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
It's a top list.
Okay. Story number 1.
Well, is this number 1 or number 5?
Yeah. Touche.
Yeah.
Number 5.
Okay.
In that I always like when American sports, and I know other, American sports are not the only thing out there. Certainly not. But I do really like when certain teams name themselves after particular regional qualities that are specific for those areas. So in this case, and this is probably, you'll probably be like, oh yeah. One of my favorite stories is why the San Francisco 49ers are called the San Francisco 49ers.
At least you like football and not baseball.
No, don't be too happy quite yet.
Okay, great.
So, and this is a fairly obvious one. I'm sure most people that are watching this, if you have a particular backstory knowledge of at least football, the 49ers are the San Francisco football team, and they're named after all the gold miners that would go down. The problem is that I can't remember why specifically they're called 49.
Yeah, why not 48?
Right.
Or earlier.
So what I'm going to do...
Gold mine thing goes back to like the 30s, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, So we'll have to look this up. So either we'll get an update, or I'll just like provide it in a title right like here. Do you see that right there? Yeah, right there. So that's the reason. That is the reason right now. So that's my story. That's story number 5. What's yours?
Okay. That's such an. I feel like that was one I should have thought of, but I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't.
This is why we story share.
Okay, so I just got done reading a great book that I recommend called Killer Angels, which is about the Civil War.
That is classic.
It's so good. I read it in college when I was studying American history. Red 1776 for the Revolutionary War.
Cool.
I'm in the military as well, so we did a trip out to Gettysburg not too long ago with my unit, and I just loved being out there. We actually walked a lot of where a lot of the soldiers walked.
Ooh.
And you get to kind of get a good grasp of the just kind of extent of everything.
Yeah.
Like walking, literally marching from one place to another. It's so exhausting. So I came across a Civil War battle that actually took place out basically on the Rio Grande. Basically General Henry Hopkins Sibley, who invaded New Mexico territory from the south in early 1862.
Okay.
And then he just basically thought he could march right up the Rio Grande into Colorado. Didn't think anybody else was there that would basically be there. But I think he was trying to find gold. I think he was basically trying to find gold for the South.
It's always about the gold.
He was just basically looking for gold and basically trying to like wheel it all back in wagons to fund the war, I guess. I'm not sure. But the 1st Regiment of Volunteers in Colorado basically heard about this guy coming. They're like, hey, they're invading us. What do we do? And everybody they got together and marched 400 miles south in 13 days.
Holy cow!
Which is nuts.
400
miles in 13 days.
It's practically 100 miles. No, I'm not doing
that. It's impressive. It's definitely doable, but it's impressive.
Lord.
These are volunteers. These are guys. They're not being led by like the Colonel Joshua Chamberlains, or like they're not like there's no like Ulysses S. Grant spurring them on.
We are so out of shape, man.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I mean, like. No, but like at least I have a bicycle. I mean, they're marching. I don't know. Anyway, bikes at least do this all day. I can do that. No problem.
Wow. So basically, they marched 400 miles to Fort Union near Santa Fe.
Okay.
And it's basically historians are deeming it or have deemed it, I guess, the Gettysburg of the West. Which I don't know if that means that it was a very bloody battle, because that's what Gettysburg was. Or if it was just a decisive factor in the West. I'm assuming it's the latter, because
that sounds about right.
It was a 2-day skirmish. The Union troops, probably relying on local ranchers as guides, outflanked the Confederates and burned their supply train. So basically, if you don't know old kind of Civil War-y type, if you outflank them, you basically get to where all their supplies are behind the army. And if you can get to there, then you can basically cut off the life. You're basically cutting off the umbilical cord of the army, right. And they can't. They basically have to retreat.
Right.
And then he went back to Texas and never returned. So I thought that was cool because when you think of the Civil War, you think of the East Coast.
Yeah.
So I think we have another update.
Another update. Hot off the press here. What do we got?
Oh, you should read this one.
Yes, of course. So the name 49ers comes from the prospectors who arrived in Northern California in the 1849 gold rush. So
there's different gold rush.
I don't know, but it's underlined in that the 1849. So my suspicion is that there might have been multiple.
They kind of like tiered it.
Maybe.
Yeah. So this was the 1838 gold rush.
Yeah.
Oh, the 1838 gold rush wasn't as great as the 1849 gold rush.
So they got buddies and alumni getting together, reunions.
Yeah. Like it's like an internal thing. Like if you were part of the 1838 gold rush, it's like whatever.
It ain't gonna work.
That was nothing compared to what we did. Yeah.
So 1849.
Cool.
49ers, guys. Facts.
There you go. Steve Young. Jerry Rice. Joe Montana. Okay, what's your 4?
4. One of my favorite legends of the Wild West is the legend of John Henry. Do you know John Henry?
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on him for one of my favorites.
Okay.
But I didn't do John Henry.
Okay, so this story is fairly known, at least in American folklore, of like the old days.
Right?
He's the hammer guy.
Yeah.
So John Henry was this mythical Black American big man, and who was the I guess back in those days when they were doing the Intercontinental Railroad.
Right. They're building it.
Yeah. So coast to coast, basically San Francisco, I think it's San Francisco to New York, and there's the Golden Spike, which was in, I believe, Utah. So during, my suspicion anyway, is during that time, there's several legends of the West that would come up. John Henry is one of them.
But he's just that.
What do you mean?
Legend, right?
Right, he's just that.
Not a real person.
As far as we know. It might have been based on
tall tale.
Could have been a badass guy that someone's like, I'm gonna write a story about this guy.
Poor guy. If he was a real guy,
right?
All of a sudden he's like, you're too great to be real, but we're just gonna tell people that you're fake.
You're John Henry.
People will buy it.
I'm Adam, actually. No. So the story goes, in the legend, there's this contest between John Henry and the mechanical nail pile driver. Steam power pile driver. Because this, and what I find very interesting is the Wild West era was happening in the United States all the while, in particular the East Coast was kind of this monstrous thing that just was growing of the industrial age. Some of it was great. We've got these modern conveniences that I'm sure we're still in some ways either enjoying today or, kind of a progress of that. But the other thing that was interesting is the industrial age, which I think we're finding happening now with the digital age, is that all of a sudden all these skilled laborers found themselves just like, I'm useless. Out of luck. So the story goes is that there's this contest and there's a lot of, I don't know, there's like, he's like, I'm going to take him on. So
there's people betting, obviously.
There's people likely, pennies and gold nuggets, etc.
Yeah. There's got to be someone man enough to try.
Oh, my name's John Henry. And mister, you got yourself a bet.
I think how the legend goes, the contest lasts for like 3 days in a row. Like that's like it's hyperbolic and stuff. But he wins.
Right.
But then he dies at the end because he worked so hard that it killed him. And that's the end of the story. And they're like, and now we all talk about John Henry. And I remember reading it as a kid and I get this lump in my throat. I'm like, wait,
the moral of the story is
trust the machine.
Work yourself to death.
Just let the computer do it, I guess. That's what we're. No.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Good.
That's the moral of the story.
Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park?
I don't know.
I
didn't. They're playing God. I don't know.
They're playing God.
You created something, and life finds a way.
That's pretty good.
He didn't stutter, obviously.
No, but it got the hand gesture. It's good.
Yeah.
So that's my story number 4. What's your story number 4?
My story number 4. This is actually it's my story number 2, but it goes along with the theme, so I don't know if I should bump it up at all.
Up to you.
I'm gonna go. Okay, we'll get to it later. I'm gonna go with Billy the Kid.
Ooh.
Not just his story.
Okay.
There's a story I came across, and I think they actually made it into a movie. I'm not actually quite sure. But so after Billy the Kid dies, so he was shot. He was shot by somebody. I forget who it was. It was some sheriff, right? And then so Billy the Kid, his name was William H. Bonney.
See why I changed his name?
Yeah, right.
Mr.
Bonney. Actually it's Billy, and middle name The, last name Kid.
BT Kid.
I guess it's documented somewhere. This could be completely conjecture. I have no idea. It's reported that one of the deputies present for the shooting said that the man Garrett shot, Sheriff Garrett, I guess was the guy, was not the fugitive they had been looking for.
Oops. So
that was a report, I guess, from one of the deputies. And I guess it's pretty well known that they disposed of the body pretty quickly. So nobody else. So when everybody showed up on site, there wasn't really a true confirming of Billy the Kid being dead. So I mean, I don't love conspiracy theories, but I love this type of conspiracy theory because it's like, who really cares? At this point, like he's obviously dead now, so it doesn't matter. But I love kind of the idea that he could have had a change of heart, lived out the rest of his life. And so this is apparently what happened. So this guy named Brushy Bill Roberts. So here's the thing. If this really is Billy the Kid, he didn't choose a really good replacement name.
Brushy Bill?
Yeah, Brushy Bill Roberts.
Okay.
Yeah. So he went from William and apparently faked his own death or got away somehow.
Okay.
And then came back as a guy named Brushy. But this is an older guy. And this is in like 1950, I think. And he was seeking pardon for the crimes of Billy the Kid. And he was basically confessing all of his murders. And it got thrown out by the governor, basically saying that he didn't believe him.
Wow.
Right? And then that guy died a short time after, supposedly, because it was a very public thing. I guess he came out and said, I'm Billy the Kid. I want to, take the blame for all of my murders. And I guess, once the press got a hold of that, it became this big story. And then he, I guess, killed himself or died shortly after. But the guy who did the investigating, the guy he kind of came out to and kind of told the story to, did like a facial recognition photo-wise from an old photo of Billy the Kid.
Weird.
Yeah, and he believes very strongly that's the same person. Yeah, but you're talking about a very old man, very young boy. At the time.
Wait, and he died when?
Age-wise?
Or like what year?
Yeah.
He or when did he resurface? What year did he resurface?
Resurfaced in 1950.
1950.
That's
Holy
what it says.
cow! Billy the Kid's
Surfaced-
Billy the old man now.
Surfaced in Texas in 1950.
Wow.
I don't know when the Billy. I mean, this is from the internet, so
No.
it might not be completely
Everything
true.
in the internet is true
Um,
that you see.
but that can, regardless of the dates, whether they line up or not.
Right.
But it makes it's a cool kind of it's not really truly documented or like a real. It's kind of more of a tall tale, I guess. But I think that's a cool conspiracy theory that he had a change of heart, lived out the rest of his life very peacefully, but then at the end of his life, like he's supposed to get it all off his chest.
Wow, that's a
throw it out
story.
there.
Wow, what a yarn.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
great.
we can make it into a movie. Why don't we?
Right.
If it hasn't already.
Well, speaking of movies and killings in the West, one of my this is my number 3. I'm on 3, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 is the story behind what the movie ended up becoming, which was the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and that is actually a full movie. Quote.
Okay.
That's like the title.
That's what the movie is called?
Yeah.
They couldn't edit that
No,
down?
but it's like classic, like old Western. I mean, it's like Pulp Fiction stuff,
okay. Alright.
which had nothing to do with Tarantino, but like that's Pulp Fiction was actually the name of those like Western style because it was made of a particular type of pulp
Oh,
that was cheap. That's why they were so cheap back in the day.
the physical material?
It was made of a cheaper version of paper.
That's why they call it Pulp Fiction?
Yeah, and it was all fiction.
It wasn't because, like, anytime there was a cut, they all drink, like, orange juice?
I mean, maybe.
Oh.
Reduce scurvy.
Yeah,
issues.
I always just assumed that it had something to do with pulpy orange juice. that I guess that's not the case.
Well, yeah, no,
Okay.
not that I know of. But
Thank you for the courtesy laugh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Where was I?
I don't know where you were going.
No, I don't know where.
Jesse James.
I need a break. Hang on. Take 3. Okay.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I did.
It's dead.
Yeah, it's dead.
Okay.
Fly. So, Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is a great film. It tells the story of the assassination of Jesse James by the
So
coward.
obviously, I have no idea who Jesse James is. So tell me what Jesse James.
So Jesse
did
James
to,
was in
to Ford being assassinated.
Okay, so Jesse James was a infamous bank robber who would rob trains and was quite both notorious, but also kind of it's kind of like how we in some ways look back on like old mafia almost or pirates with like nostalgia, you know,
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
kind of to a certain-
romanticized.
right, romanticized to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Whereas likely their day-to-day life was probably terrifying to be under their situation. But regardless, Jesse James was killed by Robert Ford. And Robert Ford was actually part of his posse for a time.
Okay.
What was really weird about this story is after Jesse James dies, of which the debate is whether or not Jesse James was like, all right, I'm done, and like let him actually be killed.
Yeah.
And there's this moment in the movie, as far as I understand, interprets the situation pretty accurately, in which, so the story goes, is that Jesse James stands up and goes and puts up a stool, and then stands on the stool, and he takes this photo, and he's looking at the top corner, and all he says is, "The picture looks dusty," and then Robert Ford shoots him dead in the back, which is very dishonorable for the West. Now, the story doesn't end there. So coward Robert Ford, he's just, in some ways he's a coward because he shot him in the back, but he also, Robert Ford, in order to make money, takes a traveling show around the West. You're talking LA, you're talking Vegas, you're talking Santa Fe probably, because it's a bigger town of that
traveling point. Show like a
theater, like a theater.
Okay.
And he reinterprets that moment of killing Jesse James, and he plays himself. So like over and over again, he's getting to kill Jesse James. Yeah,
that's very comfortable.
Yeah, very, very.
I would love to buy tickets to that show.
Yeah, it's very. Anyway, but like the movie does a great job in interpreting that. But yeah, so the story goes. That's what happened, and I think it's like super strange to me. But that's why he was called a coward for many. Those two reasons.
It's beyond cowardice.
I know, it's just
that's like bragging about cowardice.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's honestly, it would
it's
be
against the law, isn't it? I mean, Wild West law, right? If you shoot a guy in the back, that's like.
But he was Jesse James. See, that was the difference. Is that everyone first thought it'd be like, oh, well, great. They'd be like, I don't know, the king, being like, thanks for taking down Robin Hood.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. He's an outlaw, so I guess it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's no honor amongst thieves.
No honor amongst thieves. You should see the movie, though. It's a good movie.
I would definitely.
It's long. It's like 3 hours, but it's good.
Yeah?
It's real good.
Oh my goodness. So now I know a little bit about who Jesse James is.
Yeah, Jesse James.
Getting shot in the back. We should, before this is all done, I think we should do a draw. I think we should do a duel. Well, what's the rule, before I get into my story, what's the rule with duels?
It's not legal anymore?
No. Now. Yeah, obviously not now. But
for now.
In the Wild West, when they're standing out in the middle of the road.
Oh, right.
So here's what my understanding is you can't shoot a defenseless man or a guy that doesn't have a gun pointed at you, basically.
Correct.
Right? So the idea is you wait for the other guy to draw his gun.
Right.
Or you draw your gun.
Right.
Right.
That's why the draw would be said out loud.
Right, but they don't say that in the movies. They stand there to stare at each other.
Sometimes. Well, okay, so this was I know. One of the funniest scenes in Back to the Future, I always thought, was when the Biff character looks at Marty and says, "Draw," and Marty says, "No." Which is, to me, I'm like, it's a very 1980s thing to say. I guess it was 89 or something.
Yeah.
And but I'm thinking, oh gosh, that would have been so funny, like being dropped in 1885 and someone just telling you, no, not going to do it, man.
Not doing that.
I'm not in.
Well, because my understanding, so we have like, I think 1700s, right? You have the duel of, what's the guy's name? Is it Alexander Hamilton?
Mm-hmm.
Where they go back to back.
Right.
And then they take the 10 paces.
10 paces in you.
And then you turn and shoot.
Yeah.
So how did that become stand and stare at each other or yell draw?
I don't know.
And see, I rely on you for these things. You don't.
There are some things I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My guess is the bathing ethics of the West.
The bathing ethics?
Yeah, it's very different.
Oh, wow.
And that probably everyone stank. So Alexander Hamilton, for instance, he's probably a wealthy man, right? He's a New Yorker dude. He's, kind of the upper crust of.
Got a great singing voice.
Great singing voice, apparently.
Very established rapper.
Yeah, he started rap apparently. My guess is that there was. Well, this is me joking, but I think a lot of the stench of the West, it really isn't talked about as much. People need to talk about the sweat. People need to talk about the stink. People need to talk about all the mud and dung and all that stuff that was probably just lingering around.
They're just out there.
Though it might actually not be that bad. I would not have wanted to live in the 1800s or 1700s in New York City. No plumbing.
No.
Think about that.
Yeah, that's...
Where do you put everything?
Right. Well, that's
Out the
always another book. I guess I'll make book recommendations. But Imperium is another book I've been reading. It's about...
Imperium.
Yes, Imperium.
Right here.
Cicero and
Yes.
Tiro. But there's a chapter I just recently read where he's walking through ancient Rome, right?
Mhm.
And there's just a section of the city where they just dump everything. Well, it's outside the city walls, but in a certain part of the day, the wafting, just wafts into the city. So that section of the city is just disgusting. Like people's dead cats, filth, disgust, all sorts of...
I love how you say dead cats.
Well, that's what they specified.
Oh, that's what he specified.
He specified it in the book, or else I wouldn't.
Yeah, because
say dead cats.
That's such a precise thing. I'm like, you're talking garbage. Okay, garbage. You're talking filth. Yeah, filth. Dead cats.
Dead cats specifically. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But all right, on to my third.
What's your third story?
My third story, I'm gonna go with. Let's go. Since it's not a true story, I'm gonna go with Pecos Bill. And Pecos Bill is a later addition to the what did you just say? Paul Bunyan and
John Henry.
Characters.
Yeah.
So those were established a little before, but I feel like kind of Davy Crockett's. I feel like he's in that kind of realm, although Davy Crockett was a real person.
Right.
But Pecos Bill is just this old school, it's this old story that was, I think, developed in the 1930s. So the guy who wrote about it completely made the whole guy up and kind of played it off like it was old cowboy stories, from around the campfire,
Excellent.
It's part of his marketing scheme.
Brand awareness.
But he basically, it's about westward expansion, right?
Right.
And it's kind of these tall tales about how certain things became certain things.
Right.
So Pecos Bill is said to have dug the Rio Grande by hand.
Okay.
Or by plow or something. It's just a tall tale. It kind of explains, and then they have another story that explains why wolves howl at the moon, which I'll get into. But yeah. So the reason I know about it is because a little thing called Walt Disney and Medley Time, which was I think 1940s when it was out there, and then they redid it in VHS. And when I was growing up, I had Medley Time that I grew up on, and they had a thing about Johnny Appleseed, and they had a thing about this and that, and Pecos Bill was on there. So when I was a kid, I grew up watching this, the Pecos Bill Walt Disney version of the story.
Now, why can't I remember what the story was in Melody Time? Was it?
Is it Melody? It is Melody Time. It's not Medley Time.
What?
Melody. I think it said Medley Time.
Oh, it's okay.
Melody Time.
Yeah. Medley Time.
Medley Time.
What was the story?
A lot of stories, which I guess it is.
Yeah. What was the story with Pecos Bill?
They ran through kind of his whole storyline. I think they did it in song.
Interesting. Okay.
But
I have to rewatch it.
But they went through his whole storyline, which basically goes something like, well, before I get into Melody Time, the other reason I know about it is from Patrick Swayze's
Tall Tale
interpretation of Pecos Bill and Tall Tale, where he literally ropes the tornado.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was 1995.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I was 5 years old watching Patrick Swayze.
Wow.
And I honestly had no idea who he was at the time.
Right.
And I couldn't even even going back and watching it, you don't even understand who Patrick Swayze is.
That was a great movie with legends.
It was great, but it had Paul Bunyan and it had John Henry.
Yep.
I forget what the big storyline is, but
I think they're trying to help save a kid from some evil landlord person.
It's typical story arc.
Yeah.
Kid's unhappy with his life.
Likely doesn't have a father.
Or a father figure.
Yeah.
And
at least if it's Disney, that's
he's told all these tall tales, but he's heard enough that they're not real and doesn't believe them. And all of a sudden,
don't believe him.
All of a sudden, he gets hit on the head with a branch, and then Pecos Bill comes to life and comes to meet him. The only thing I remember from it verbatim is, "And we never spit in front of women and children."
I remember that.
I don't know. There's this whole vow scene.
Oh,
and
that's
like,
right.
It's like they say, blah, 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 nah, 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 and we never spit in front of women and children. And they all spit.
I'm going to have to rewatch this.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to watch it too. All right, so real briefly, story of Pecos Bill. Born in Texas in 1830s, so Wild West-ish type of time frame. He fell out of a covered wagon as a kid.
Hard times.
His family was moving out of where they did live because it was overcrowded. And obviously his parents were great people because they didn't realize that he had fallen out of the wagon. And then was raised by coyotes. And then later on in life, his brother eventually found him and had to convince him that no, you're not a coyote.
Wow.
You're a real person. But at that point, he had already established his relationship with the coyote, Ken.
Ken?
Yeah, well, Ken, like their
family. Ken.
Yeah,
Ken.
there might have been a Ken.
Hey, Ken. What's up, Ken?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's that. Obviously, he grew up to become a cowboy.
Of course. What else would he do?
He had a rattlesnake for a lasso.
Okay.
His horse was named Widowmaker.
Widowmaker.
So there's a whole story about how, because they call him Widowmaker because nobody could ride him. So everybody would basically die trying to ride the horse.
Interesting.
So Pecos Bill tamed the horse and was able to ride it, so Widowmaker. And then he's said to have an appetite for dynamite.
Like eating dynamite?
He would literally eat dynamite.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Again, this is a tall tale.
Very tall.
Don't try to eat dynamite at home.
We do not at all promote eating dynamite.
Nope. Lassoing a twister, that was something that he was said to have done. Slewfoot Sue was his lover. He met her as she was riding a giant catfish down the Rio Grande. So I guess in the Wild West, that's instant love right there.
You want to talk about a romantic evening? Let's go catfish riding.
If you really want to meet a good girl, go to the Rio Grande.
Find just one of those giant catfish limos.
Just sit there until you see the most beautiful girl riding a catfish.
It has to be a catfish, though.
It has to be specifically a catfish.
Yep.
So you might be sitting there for a while.
Yeah.
So he proposes to her. He shoots out all the stars in the sky, leaving one star or a lone star.
Oh.
So that's the story of the Lone Star.
Oh. Okay.
Shoots out all the stars in the sky and proposes to her, and then during the wedding, she wants to ride Widowmaker. So Widowmaker apparently has a personality, especially in Melody Time. He was a very, personified. And he hates Slewfoot Sue, so he basically bucks her off of him because he's jealous that Pecos Bill's getting married and he doesn't have enough attention. So there's a lot of different versions of Slewfoot Sue, but basically, so she wears a bustle, right?
Right.
It's back in the day, all right. The female norm was to wear a bustle.
Right.
Just this big
thing on the back, right?
Big wire thing on the back of the dress, and it's underneath the dress. But apparently she keeps bouncing on her bustle. And it bounces her pretty much higher and higher and higher until eventually she hits the moon. So there's a few different stories of what happens when she hits the moon. My favorite, which is the story that they tell in Melody Time, is that she landed on the moon, she stays on the moon.
Okay.
Which makes sense. The moon has its own gravitational pull. It doesn't make sense that she would, once you get to a certain extent, you kind of have to fall towards the moon. Whatever. I'm sure they knew that at the time. But, and then Pecos Bill, saddened by the loss of his wife, goes back to the coyotes and starts howling at the moon in sadness. And that's why the coyotes howl at the moon.
That's a good story.
Yeah, that's a good tall tale, right? That's why tall tales exist.
See, when you say that, you know where I am right now?
What?
In front of a campfire.
Yeah.
Next to a cactus.
Yeah.
Hearing a guy playing harmonica.
Yeah.
Seeing the old guy with
we should get marshmallows.
Beard. Yeah, it's.
Let's just stop this.
That's a perfect campfire story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, hopefully the viewers and listeners feel the same way.
Get drawn in.
Yeah. I would do anything for a marshmallow and s'more right now. That'd be awesome. All right. So what's your? Is that what are we
two?
On? 2.
I'm on 2. So I'm debating on which the order is, but I think I'm gonna go with this one because it's a little darker, and it's true.
I like dark.
And I feel like it needs to be discussed, if nothing else, because it's a part of the West that is just kind of obvious. Do you know of the man named James Polk? Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so
I'm
no, it's fine. He was our president way back in. No, it's all right.
Great.
Way back. I mean, I never knew about a guy named Milford. I think we have a president named Milford at some point down the line. So there's this guy named James Polk is going to be this hopeful president. I mean, if you guys are watching this, you probably have at least seen the in the States anyway, the Democratic debates are going on right now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The election isn't until next November.
Yeah.
So that's like 1 month and
there's like 20-some people.
It's like the final. It's honestly like March Madness. I'm waiting until it gets down to like 5, and then I'm going to start watching more.
Wait, do you have your tree ready for
my tree?
No, bracket?
not yet. I'm not bothering with it. I never even bothered about March Madness, but that's another story. Yeah. So James Polk, he's running for president, right? He wants to run for president. So his whole thing, and imagine this being your campaign speech, is basically like, America, we're going to go from sea to shining sea. So at that point in time, before he got elected, the most western city in the United States at the time, the official U.S., was St. Louis. Okay. St. Louis was kind of the gateway to what was the frontier. And that's kind of part of the reason why I have that giant arch in St. Louis. St. Louis was always that kind of, with the Mississippi River, it was this symbolic city. So, imagine, if you will, you are in St. Louis, right? St. Louis is the western edge. It'd be like if you lived in, I don't know, like California now, kind of thing. So in his campaign, he says, more or less, he says, hey, United States, if you vote for me, a couple things are going to happen. Number one, we're going to create this giant nation because manifest destiny is the thing. And, it's I don't know, it's a forgotten country, kind of thing. Trying to spread out as far as we can. And his other thing he said is, I'm going to do it one term. After 4 years, I'm done. I'm putting the hat on the hat rack, and then that's it. I'm not going to run again.
He said that.
He says this. That's his
going to do it.
That's his campaign promise, right? You know how campaign promises go. But so he makes this promise. He gets elected. Within, I don't know. Let's make up a number.
Okay.
6 months.
Okay.
He declares war with Mexico. So Mexico at the time had just recently-ish achieved independence from Spain, right? So like Cinco de Mayo is all kind of tied into I think it was actually the French. Never mind, Cinco de Mayo, scratch that, going back. So Mexico, independent nation, becomes their own thing. If you actually look at the old pictures, like maps, graphs of actually how far the Mexican Empire went, I mean, basically it was like the tippy top of California.
Really?
So imagine like the Redwoods was the absolute top of the Mexican Empire.
Yeah.
Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, I think parts of Colorado. So all this is Mexico. So Polk says, okay, we're going to declare war with Mexico. We're going to do this. Boom, done. So America elects them. They declare war with Mexico. And because the northern regions of Mexico are so unpopulated, Santa Fe was the largest town at the time. Vegas was a tiny little village. Yeah. LA was a mission town. The only real things of note at the time was San Francisco and Santa Fe. And the United States wanted San Francisco very much to get themselves connected with China and Japan, etc. So they get there. And at first, they actually were able to essentially take over those sections, because the Mexican Empire was rather thin at the time in that area, but also the Mexican people were so afraid that the U.S. was going to burn down their churches, not let them practice Catholicism, all this other thing. Okay. And then the generals were instructed, no, just show up. Yeah. You guys just say it's ours. It's yours, and hey, you're Americans. We're going to treat you like brothers. Yeah. So, frankly, I think it kind of took people aback. Yeah. That they were actually welcomed that much, and then the plot thickens even further. Yeah. Then the Mexicans say, oh yeah, by the way, we've been warring in these skirmishes, more or less, for like 200 years against this people group that lives over there. And they point in that general direction. And the army's like, well, what are you talking about? And so what ends up happening is this perfect storm of conflict between the United States and the newly acquired Mexican territories and the Navajo Nation. So the Navajo have lived there for
before
13. I think it's like 1300s. It's a long time, and they'd always lived in between these four giant mountain peaks. I want to say it's like the size of Connecticut, so it's a huge, vast amount of land that they kind of live and or meander around. So the United States is just like, okay, and they basically wipe out the army within a matter of months. And then they displace all the other, the Navajo who are left, or who haven't been killed. And here's the crazy thing. So they're like, okay, so we're just gonna and this was the forward thinking view at the time. Hey, we're not gonna kill them. Let's put them in these things called reservations.
Oh, right.
Because that's the nice thing to do, right? We're not killing them. That's great. So that was
their land and tell them to
leave. That was the advanced thinking of the day, which I've always thought history's interesting that way when you look back.
Right.
But what's crazy is that so they move all the Navajo off of their land. The Navajo have not been outside of those four peaks in 700 years. And there's always been these stories within the Navajo tribes of like, hey, if you leave these four peaks, you're dead. You're doomed.
That's home.
Just don't leave.
This is where we exist. This is where we've always existed.
And so they place them in this area, but it ends up being like the river's filled with like alkaline in the water, so all these people drop dead, and so the army's like, okay, that was our mistake. So then they put the Navajo people back in the same area. But the Navajo nation is a sovereign nation. I want to say it's the largest one in the North American continent, and that size of Connecticut is still like the same. It goes through Arizona, New Mexico. I want to say parts of Colorado, but I could be wrong. Or Utah, maybe, I forget. But it's a huge, vast space of land. But the Navajo continue to live there. So anyway.
Still a sad story.
Oh, it's a very sad story. It's very complicated.
Very sad story of ignorance from like a governmental standpoint. But it is. I mean, that's true. But at the same time, like if you're any type of like leader, like for America at that time, like you just don't know how to handle that.
I think Colt knew. Oh, okay. He definitely was like, we're just gonna take care of it. We're gonna wipe it all out. The last thing I'll say though, so he did stick to his promise. After 4 years, put his hat on the wall, walked out the door. 3 months later, drops dead.
That actually leads into my story number 2,
What's your story
which is Cynthia Ann Parker. So if you've ever watched Dances with Wolves.
Oh, is that the lead actress?
Yes, the character, the white woman, in the Indian tribe. So she was known as Nadua.
Nadua, okay.
I think that's how you say it, which basically means someone found.
It's a cool name.
So she was an Anglo-American woman who was kidnapped in 1836 at the age of 10 by a Comanche war band which had attacked her family's settlement, and the Comanche name means someone found. So they adopted her and she lived with them for 24 years and adopted their ways, and then she married a Comanche chief, Peta Nocona.
Yeah,
okay. And had 3 children with him, including the last free Comanche chief, Quanah Parker. So the chief actually took
the name,
her last name.
Wow.
Which was interesting because how would they know? Like, did they know what her name was?
Well, I mean, she's 10. She probably knew her name. What her name was?
Did I know what my name was at 10? I don't know.
I think you would.
Mom, if you're watching, could you just comment below and let me know if I knew what my name was at 10? I wouldn't put it past myself not to know. That's interesting though. I mean, obviously we don't know enough about Native American culture or anything like that, but how accepting they were, really. I mean, and like kind of open-mindedness. And that's one of my favorite parts about that movie is like him learning kind of how they work and like, but I mean, obviously you had different sides and different tribes and different families and all that kind of stuff to work with. But I think that's a cool story. And then so basically at age 34, she was discovered by Texas Rangers, and
not the baseball team.
no, yeah, Texas Rangers found her, and in typical American fashion said, "Oh, you don't belong here. Like, we found you.
Just scooped her up.
We rescued you."
Yeah.
And basically grabbed her, took her out of the tribe, and made her live in Texas, I think. So basically spent the remaining 10 years of her life refusing to adjust to life in white society. So basically they made her like live in like away from her family and away from her kids, and she escaped eventually and went back to her family and then was removed again.
Ugh.
Like, it's just so sad.
Ugh.
But it's like and then eventually, I mean, as I guess most of these stories go, out of grief she died.
Wow.
Yeah. She stopped eating and
Oof.
died at but basically, so died in 1871, and then the character in the movie, 1990 movie with what's his name? Kevin Costner.
There you go. I didn't need to say
she stands with a fist. Is her name. So someone found is her name in real life. Stands with a fist. As a second. So I kind of chose it because I love Dances with Wolves. It's one of my first. It was literally one of my first like serious movies I remember watching growing up.
Was that one of your first 2 VHSer ones at home?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I declared a serious movie.
Yep.
Like Titanic, right?
Yeah. Ben-Hur.
Yeah. And two VHS tapes. This is serious.
Yeah.
Like, this is a story. So I think it was my first 2 VHS tape movie that I watched. So that's why it's one of my favorite stories.
That's great.
Once I did the research on who Stands with the Fist really was, and I think it's a cool story of acceptance and love, and then ultimately ends with her
grief
death, and obviously Americans trying to think that we know what's right and what's acceptable, and saying like the stupidity behind going to somebody with her children and her family and saying, "Oh, this isn't the place for you. Like, we have a great place for you back here, away from your family. Let's take you over there." It's like, oh my goodness, swing and a miss.
The old saying, "Read the room."
Yeah,
people like just.
That was the classic. That was the first case of read the room. She doesn't want to leave her children.
I feel like American, just in general, we just need to learn how to read the room. Like, Anyway. Yep. Hello. All right. All right. So my number one will feel nothing like a Western story, but it's also a very important part of the United States. So we all know about the national parks, right? Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So founded by.
I am aware of that.
The idea was founded by Mr. Teddy Roosevelt, one of my personal favorite Americans, a very complex, kind of crazy dude. Honestly, he's kind of like the Dwayne Johnson of presidents.
He had a big stick, I hear.
Yeah, big stick. Just.
In every sense of the word.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But man survives polio as a child. He's very sickly as a child. No, I'm sorry. FDR, he survived polio. Teddy Roosevelt was just sickly, I think. I think. So Teddy wanted to establish a set of parks. He was a hunter by pleasure. He would hunt big game around the world. But he was also a conservationist, which I think is a very interesting blend of the two.
Yeah. Well, they usually go hand in hand. I don't know.
Usually.
I don't understand it,
yeah.
But it's a love and a respect of nature.
I think he, more than most, in his era anyway, understood that even though America is vast It is not infinite in its resources.
Okay. Yeah.
Mainly, I think the biggest way to describe that is how many buffalo there used to be.
Yeah.
Compared to how many buffalo ended up happening, where I think it almost dwindled down to the hundreds.
Yeah.
From we're talking like clouds
yeah.
of buffalo on the prairie, you know, tens of millions.
Yeah.
I think they say almost like 50 million or something, some gargantuan number.
Right.
But his whole thing was like, hey, let's conserve these big chunks of land. Because you know we keep expanding, so unless we actually like seek these out and cordon them off, then it's be taken over. And plus, there's some beautiful places in the United States.
Absolutely,
it's great to
especially out west.
Especially out west. Yes. So places like obviously Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Zion, Arches, Yellowstone, Joshua Tree, Death Valley. There's a few others around the United States, especially out west.
Yeah.
The big one, though, and the original, we're talking the OG of national parks, is Yellowstone.
Right.
And Yellowstone, I believe, was founded in 1911. I could be wrong. But Yellowstone it's kind of like, I call it like the Disneyland of wildlife. It's like everything you ever wanted to see. There's antelope, there's puma or mountain lions, mountain goats, bison,
rhinoceros,
rhinos, dinosaurs, people. So there's this whole array of creatures, and then even cooler, or I should say hotter, there are these hot springs, geysers. Yeah. Old Faithful goes off every however many hours per day or something. Yeah. It's kind of weird how like around the clock it is, right?
Yeah, that was my nickname in high school.
Old Faithful?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Okay. I mean, it'd be great. I mean, but I don't know.
It's a joke.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a good joke.
Yeah.
Fooled me.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
So, like, here's the thing that's funny about all those geological springs that are bubbling up. You know why?
I don't know what that is. I don't know what they are.
Okay, so it's these.
I'm assuming it has something to do with oil.
Not a bad guess, but no.
Dead fossils?
No. So usually when you have warm springs like that, and we're talking like you'd like lose your skin if you jumped in it. It's like it's really hot.
Right.
Which they say, hey, this isn't a pool.
Don't
go diving.
Don't jump.
You will die.
Yeah.
You will burn your eyeballs off.
Yes. Be like that scene in Indiana Jones.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's losing their face in those movies. Or their heart, but that's okay.
Everybody lost face in the Crystal Skull movie.
Boy, that's required a whole
other
episode.
We won't even dive down.
So, in the case of Yellowstone, the reason why you have all of these warm geological activity, it usually means that there's something underneath that's heating. It's kind of like when you're cooking on your stove, and you got water and it starts bubbling up. Obviously, it means that there's a heat source underneath. Yeah. Now, the heat source is known as a supervolcano, and the supervolcano dwells underneath the entirety of Yellowstone, more or less, which is also the reason why there's it's very nutrient dense and why there's all those animals there and whatever. So there's this movie that came out in 2011 or 2010 called 2012. And it was based on the whole thing, the world ending. It's very ridiculous.
Yes,
and it's almost comical in how ridiculous it was.
Dwayne Johnson in that one?
No, John Cusack. No, you're thinking San Andreas.
That's right.
That's close. Things being destroyed.
Yeah.
So and this is obviously probably a lot worse than it actually would be, but I don't know. They say that if that supervolcano were to ever blow, first of all, Yellowstone would have maybe a second of a view, and
Yellowstone would be redstone.
Yeah, it'd be just done. It'd be cookstone, brimstone, actually, probably a better.
Yeah.
So
Deadstone.
Yeah, tombstone. Good movie.
We haven't gotten to my number one yet.
Okay, all right. So number one, Yellowstone, instantly torched. That'd be it. Then within about, I don't know, half a day, the entirety of the American West would be covered in ash. And then in about a week, 2 weeks, they're like, well, and then North America would basically die.
Right.
Because they would be covered with 3 inches worth of ash. Right. And then they would say that the super volcano would be so big, hypothetically, worst case scenario, is that the ash from the volcano continually, erupting, would then blanket the entire world in cloud cover for like a year, which would then mean all the plants would die. Right. Which would then mean, and then, this is all hyperbolic thing. But
you're really bumming me out.
No, I mean, all I'm saying is that we got to take life just like the West. Got to take advantage of it, even though you never know if you're going to reach tomorrow.
Yeah, go rob that train.
Go rob that train. But what I love about it is that we are, life is bigger than us, I guess, is what I like about
life,
it.
Life finds a way.
And I mean, it's very American. Why have a volcano when you can have a super volcano?
Right, yeah. It's very, very fitting that it's on this land. Are there any other super volcanoes that we know of?
I don't know. I mean, there's a Super Bowl, but, that's a different type of super.
Yeah, that's what I call my cereal bowl.
Hey there, partner. You want to rob a bank? No, I do not. Well, what's your number one?
Well, hold on. Before you tell me number one, I have to tell you my Yellowstone story. So when I was a kid, we went to Yellowstone. We were in a Ford Excursion limited series. My great uncle had ordered it. He worked on a farm. It was just if you know anything about cars, Excursion is like the second biggest thing out there outside of a Hummer, basically.
Yeah, I remember that.
My family was not very eco-friendly, but that's what Indiana farm community is. So anyway, it was a very big truck. We're driving through Yellowstone. We all feel very safe. But you kind of get to a point where I think in Yellowstone where you have to stop because wildlife, right?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Not literally hit, physically, but we ran into this herd of buffalo, bison, just kind of meandering around the road and in the road, and everybody just kind of stopped and taking photos and all that kind of stuff, rolling their windows down, which I was kind of like, let's not. And then all of a sudden, so I think it was my mom. No, my dad was driving. My mom was in the passenger seat, and all of us kids are kind of piled in the back looking out. And this bison's in front of us, and it's just running at us, full speed.
Full on buffalo gallop.
Speed.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah. So this is kind of like episode 1 with the giraffe.
Oh yeah, it's coming. It's coming at you.
This thing is coming at us.
It's like a bulldozer.
And my mom is yelling at the top of her lungs. All of us kids, I wasn't as worried because I was like, well, it's a huge truck, number one. If there's any damage, it's going to happen to my parents, which I love them, but at least they're shielding it from me, right? Mom and Dad, I love you, but I wasn't too concerned. I was just more freaked out, what's happening, you know?
Right.
And then right at the last second, just kind of veers off. Last second, there was a good solid 5 to 10 seconds where we were we're going to collide with this thing.
Toying with your mind.
Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. I don't remember anything else about Yellowstone. I'm youngest of 4, so it's I don't remember anything else other than that moment. And I just remember thinking if I was not in this vehicle, I would be my pants would be stained completely. On both ends, front and back. There's no way anything stained. The flight aspect of my brain probably wouldn't have even worked at that point. I probably just would have stood there.
Stood still.
Yeah. Anyway. Yellowstone National Park. Go there if you get a chance.
You should go there.
Yeah, that's our recommendation for this episode.
Yellowstone, right here.
# Yellowstone. All right. So speaking of Tombstone.
Yes.
So again, a lot of my Wild West stories are based off Wild West movies. The best Wild West type of movie I've ever watched, Tombstone, is awesome.
I'll be your Huckleberry.
I'm your Huckleberry. It used to be my text message. Remember back in the day when it was cool to download sounds for your phone?
Oh, I remember that. Glory days of the Razors, right? Razor phone? Motorola?
Razors. I think this one was a flip phone, but I did have the sliding one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, where you could text on the keyboard.
Yep.
But yeah, so I would download I'm Your Huckleberry for whenever my brother texted me. And I had the Mighty Python arrow, they're
message for yourself.
Yeah, and then arrow in the chest. Message for
boys, huh?
Yeah, that would be my message for when somebody else texted me.
I like that.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of humor in college, but of course everybody did it, and you didn't realize everybody was doing it, and it was not unique at all. But anyway, so Tombstone is a story about Wyatt Earp. I mean, he's kind of heavily romanticized in, I guess, kind of like nowadays, like in the Wild West, I guess. But so it kind of follows Wyatt Earp. I forget that actor's name.
Val Kilmer?
Val Kilmer was Doc Holliday.
Oh, you're right.
The guy who plays Wyatt Earp, I can't remember his name.
Kurt Russell.
Yes,
there you go.
Does an amazing job. It's just an amazing movie. But anyway, the gunfight at the OK Corral is my number one story. And it's my number one story because I feel like it's everything you want in the Wild West. All in, like, you want the shootout, right? But it turns out it wasn't really that much of a shootout, and it wasn't at the OK Corral. So it's almost like the guy who owned the OK Corral was like, oh yeah, that happened. It happened right here.
Actually, it was over here.
It actually happened like 3 buildings down. It actually happened behind like a theater or something.
Was it the So-So Theater?
Yeah,
the OK Corral?
Nobody knows. Oh, the C.S. Fly's photographic studio.
Yeah, I can see
that
why they
doesn't
went
sound
OK
right.
Corral.
Yeah. Gunfight at the Fly's photographic studio.
Ooh.
So anyway, this is a 30-second shootout, and this is classic Wild West. You have lawmen, which is basically the Earp brothers, Wyatt Earp, Morgan Earp, and Virgil. And then you have Doc Holliday, who is basically the doctor in town who basically takes up arms with the marshal. Well, so Virgil is the actual marshal. So he's the real law. The oldest brother is. Wyatt and Morgan are basically the younger brothers just tagging along, helping him out, but they're deputized, basically. Right. So they deputize Doc Holliday, and he becomes a lawman, at least for that day. And they know that there's cowboys hanging out. So cowboys back in the day, at least the true definition of a cowboy, at least for some period in history for the Wild West, was outlaw. Like they're not following any type of law. Like it's just like they're making their own rules. They're out, they're doing their own thing. They're kind of like the pirates of the Wild West. Even though, you know, nowadays cowboys is so romanticized, and like every young boy wants to be a cowboy, you know. But the kind of reality of it at the time was that they were kind of jerks. So it's regarded as the most famous shootout in the history of American Wild West, even though it was 30 seconds long. So the cowboys were Billy Claiborne, Ike and Billy Clanton, Tom and Frank McClory, and the lawmen were the town marshal, which is Virgil Earp, and then Morgan Earp, and then Wyatt Earp, and then Doc Holliday.
A lot of sibling warfare going on this.
Yeah, there's at least 3 brothers included in this. Yeah, so it's sibling rivalry, but in a different sense.
What happens? What happens?
So basically, the cowboys are kind of just known to be like they were wanted for something previously, so they're trying to be the Earp brothers are trying to arrest them for that crime, whatever it was that they did, and they've had other skirmishes with them before, and this just hasn't turned out to be anything. So this is like the big stance. It's in the middle of town. Everybody's around, right? They're going there to take them in a very public way. So that's kind of what it became. But basically, what happened is they're out and they're a little, according to the story, they're a little drunk. The cowboys were, even though they're not technically at the OK Corral. But apparently they weren't necessarily within their wits, I guess. But basically, they show up to arrest them, and they have that classic Wild West moment, right? The stare down. Yeah.
Wait, you ready?
And then,
go one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Whoosh. Right.
Never looked that intensely into another man's eyes.
No. Well, it's okay. I don't have a 6. I don't have a Colt 45 or whatever it's called.
But yeah, so basically they have that moment, right? And they're cowboys, so they don't want to go peacefully. So it doesn't say who drew first. the romantic in me wants to say the Cowboys drew first, and then the Lawmen came out.
Right.
But basically, it was just this 30-second shootout that resulted in the Billy Clanton and both McClure brothers that were killed. Ike Clanton, Billy Claiborne, and a guy named Wes Fuller, who must have just been some innocent bystander.
Hey!
Just coming out of his photo studio. He's like, "What's going on? Like, what? Can you
Get
guys
back in your studio.
Can you guys take this somewhere else, please? Like, this is my studio." They ran from the fight. Virgil, Morgan, and Doc Holliday were all wounded, but Wyatt Earp came out unscathed.
Yeah, Wyatt.
And I think that's kind of where his romanticism begins.
Because he escaped unharmed.
Because he wasn't injured in that fight.
Interesting.
But yeah, if you watch Tombstone or anything like that, he's obviously the main character. But obviously this created like this huge feud. It's a story in itself, but it's a bigger story altogether, which is basically what Tombstone's all about. It kind of creates this. I mean, Morgan Earp is murdered. I think a couple months later, he's shot through the billiard window, which by the Cowboys. So
wow.
And then Virgil Earp is attacked, but not killed. Is basically an assassination attempt, and I think he lost the use of his arm. And then Wyatt Earp basically just goes on this vendetta, becomes a marshal himself, and goes on a vendetta to basically rid the world of cowboys. And yeah, doesn't really succeed fully, but if you watch any stories or any movies, I'm sure he does.
Wow.
But yeah, he just basically he has a personal vendetta, but I think he became an outlaw in and of himself because of basically his revenge for the murder of Morgan and the attack on Virgil. But that Wyatt Earp is just like, that was, again, one of the movies that I watched when I was younger that was just like, it's one of the first true Western, not true, I don't know what a true Western really would be, but it's definitely a Western story.
Yeah.
And it's the classic, like, lawless country, but people trying to find, people trying to enforce law within that.
Interesting.
It's kind of like cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And I just remembered what my other story was.
Did you?
I did. I finally did.
Let's do it.
It's the whole reason why I wore the darn hat. NASA, Houston. Houston, we have a problem, etc. Briefly put, do you know why Houston's actually in Texas? Sorry.
Because it's physically located there.
Yeah, because that's where it was built. No, do you know why NASA is actually in Houston, Texas?
So it's JFK.
Yes.
It was a senator. It was a Texas senator that deeply supported his, because JFK was the advocate for NASA, right?
Oh yeah.
He's the whole reason NASA pretty much existed and was successful. This is the space race, right? So, but my understanding is that there was a Texas senator that was strongly backing and in support of that, and that's what.
Oh, yeah.
And he insisted that NASA make its roots in.
Well, that's part of the story.
Okay.
The other part is very geographical.
You want to do the Paul Harvey?
And now this is the rest of the story.
Good.
Yeah.
That was good.
Thanks.
I think there's a deeper pause.
Yeah.
I think. And now
the rest of the story. I don't even think that's the right quote, but
no.
Now you know.
Well, that's at the end.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
briefly put, the reason why it's in Houston is the same reason why Cape Canaveral was built in particular Florida, right, for the launch site.
Okay.
You ever think about the way the United States is according to its equator? Those two are actually the closest. This will blow your mind. So it's actually technically closer to the moon as the further, the south you go to the equator. So it's actually less time of a gap for radio signal. This is the crazy part, though. Jules Verne, remember the old French science fiction guy? The old writer, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, during the Center of the Earth.
Yeah.
He did this book called From the Earth to the Moon, and he predicted in 1860, that the Americans, one, would be the ones to go to the moon, and two, it would either be between Florida and Texas, where they would actually launch the spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they ended up choosing in the book Florida, not the area of Cape Canaveral, but they got Jacksonville, which is, for any estimation, pretty close.
Yeah.
So anyway, I like that as the new part of what the American West ended up becoming. in the fact that it became part of the space age. One, because there's so much space, but within the West.
Yeah.
But I also it's like
the new frontier.
It's the new frontier. It's the next frontier.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of infinite
poetic.
space. Yeah. Well,
That's a very poetic.
Yeah. It's better
I like that as the number one.
Yeah. It's better than super volcanoes.
I was wondering why you're wearing the NASA hat.
I know. Well,
I was going to ask you about it. If I would have asked you about it, you could have remembered.
That's okay. And now we know about super volcanoes and NASA. Well, you get the rating. So what do you?
Okay, so the Bruin Board's rating for
is it a 1?
No, not this game.
Oh, okay.
All right. So as you guys know, we actually, we don't play the game. We're not doing that. It's just not the type of show we wanted to do where we play a game the whole time. But we are going to do a review of the game. This is the official Bruin Board's review. So this is. My company, I always do a selfish plug at Bruin Boards for Instagram, Twitter. We do events here in the city, here in Brooklyn specifically. Alex is a member. He comes out to game nights. We play games. It's awesome. It's fun. And basically, we do reviews for games and suggest games. And basically, the idea is the rating scheme is going to help people understand what we think are good games, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Life did not receive a very good review. This one's going to be a little bit better. So do you want to do the drum roll? The Bruin Board's rating for Colt Express is a 7.8, which is the highest that we've ever given. We've only officially rated about 5 games, but we're just starting out. And
7.8.
7.8.
That's pretty generous of you.
I don't think it's very good. It's a good game.
Yeah,
it's a good game.
That's good.
You should try it out. The next closest game closest to this was like a 7.6. It was a game called House of Danger, which is a choose your own adventure game, which is very unique as well. I rate a little bit higher for games that are a little different and offer something different. And this is definitely a game. The 3D aspect of it. There's not too many programming games out there. A lot of them are kind of robot-based because that kind of fits the theme. Like you're programming things into a robot, and then your robot has to do something.
Interesting.
So to apply it to this is, I think, just kind of a fun way of playing this type of this arena. I think.
Cool.
So I'm very happy to have this type of game on the show and to move forward.
And I will not challenge you to a duel to contest that score.
Okay.
1, because I don't do duels, but 2, I think I would agree with you on the score.
Okay, but if we were going to duel, would you want to do the back-to-back in pace, or the stare at each other?
Stare at each other.
Why?
It gives me a chance to potentially be like, no. Can't do that in the old English way. Can't do that.
So that brings us to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So I think that was another fun time. So as usual, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Check out Bruin Boards, www.bruinboards.com for our events in Brooklyn and hopefully soon elsewhere.
Yeah.
Our plan is to spread it as far as we can. So, do you want to start off the closing here?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Until next time.
Be happy.
Brew hoppy.
And
game on.
Thanks, guys.
It tastes so much better this time.
Yeah. Yes, this is a better ending.
So much.
Are you going to finish?
Probably.
I don't know if you noticed, I poured you some.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I was feeling generous. Are you biking back?
Yeah.
Are you? I probably shouldn't have poured you any extra. I'm sorry.